Scene opens abruptly in a tense, luxurious office. An icy male voice speaks as printed papers are slid across a large desk. Man's voice. Explain this. A woman's voice, laced with disbelief and horror. Woman's voice. This isn't... I didn't send this. I swear, man's voice. The logs show it originated from your workstation. Attached, highly confidential financial data. Why should I believe this isn't exactly what it looks like? Tense. Silence hangs in the air. The woman sounds trapped, devastated. Her simple act of kindness opened doors she never imagined. Now those same doors might be slamming shut, trapping her in a nightmare of corporate betrayal. Was she framed? Can she fight back against the billionaire who changed her life only to potentially destroy it? Find out what happens next. Hit that like button if you felt the tension. Subscribe to follow her fight for the truth and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single twist as her life unravels. The rain didn't just fall. It assaulted the city, turning Lexington Avenue into a slick, reflecting river of flickering neon and hurried headlights, each drop hammered against the worn pavement, a relentless drumbeat against the silence of the late hour. It was past 11, the air thick with the damp chill that seeped into everything, even the warm, greasy air inside the Lexington diner. The open sign still glowed a defiant beacon against the encroaching dark, but its time was running out. Inside, Olivia Miller moved with the practiced economy of someone who'd spent far too many hours on her feet. 12 hours today. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before. Her shoulders ached with a familiar weariness, the dampness clinging to her chestnut skin, not just from the diner's humid warmth, but from the sheer exhaustion of keeping afloat. She wiped down the counter, the scent of stale coffee and frying onions clinging to her apron. Rent was due. The nursing school loan payments loomed, and the sketches tucked away in her small apartment, dreams deferred, felt further away than ever. Still, exhaustion had never managed to dull the persistent spark of kindness within her. It was a stubborn flame, refusing to be extinguished by the harsh winds of reality. That's when she saw him, a small figure huddled just beyond the halo of the diner's sign, almost swallowed by the downpour. A boy hunched in a battered wheelchair, dark hair plastered to his forehead. His coat, thin and frayed, offered little protection against the biting wind and rain. His small hands gripped the worn arms of the chair, knuckles white, shivering visibly even from across the room. Olivia frowned, setting her rag down. That wasn't right. No child should be out in this alone, pushing open the heavy diner door. She shivered as the raw wind hit her face. "Hey!" She called out, her voice, gentle but carrying over the rain's noise. She hurried over, crouching beside the wheelchair, ignoring the cold drops soaking through her thin uniform. "Hey, sweetie, what are you doing out here all by yourself?" The boy flinched, startled, then looked up. His eyes wide and startlingly blue in his pale face held a universe of uncertainty. I'm waiting," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper against the storm. "For my dad." Olivia glanced up and down the deserted street. Empty sidewalks glistened under the sputtering streetlights. A lone pawn shop sign blinked erratically across the road. Cash for gold. No one else was in sight. Just the relentless rain and the boy. "Where is he?" she asked softly, concern tightening her chest. She'd seen this scene before, in different forms, too many times. Kids left waiting, hopes slowly dimming like faulty neon. The boy just shrugged, pulling his thin coat tighter, a gesture of futile defense. Olivia's heart ached. She bit her lip, then forced a warm smile. Well, you can't wait out here, honey. You'll catch your death. She gestured towards the diner door. Come inside with me. Just for a bit, okay? It's warm and I was just about to close up anyway. We can wait together. He hesitated, his gaze flicking from her face to the warm glow of the diner, then back again. A flicker of trust, fragile but present, sparked in his eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Gently, Olivia took hold of the wheelchair's handles. All right then, let's get you out of this monsoon. She pushed him carefully over the threshold, the wave of warm air hitting them instantly, thick with the comforting scent of brewed coffee and something sweet. Leftover pie. Maybe. She maneuvered him to a booth near the back, away from the door, close to the rattling radiator. Grabbing a clean, dry towel from behind the counter, she draped it over his small, trembling shoulders before crouching down again to meet his eyes. I'm Olivia, she said, her smile genuine now. What's your name? He sniffed, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Michael. He whispered, his gaze fixed on the tabletop. Michael. Olivia repeated approvingly. That's a strong name. Are you hungry, Michael? He nodded hesitantly, still avoiding her eyes. Olivia didn't press. Action spoke louder. She moved towards the small kitchen space. Minutes later, she returned, setting a steaming plate before him, a perfectly golden grilled cheese sandwich, oozing slightly at the edges, next to a small bowl of rich tomato soup. Her own childhood comfort food, the meal her grandmother used to make on nights when the world felt too big and too cold. Here you go, she said softly, tucking a paper napkin into the collar of his damp coat. On the house, Michael looked up. Then his blue eyes wide as he stared at the food. He picked up half the sandwich with slightly trembling fingers and took a large bite. A soft sigh escaped him. This is, he mumbled around the mouthful, this is really good. Olivia chuckled a warm sound that chased away some of the diner's late-night gloom. Glad you like it. She watched him eat a familiar pang in her chest. So young to look so weary. Across the street, parked deep in the shadows, where the rain and darkness converged, sat a sleek black Bentley. Its engine was silent, its tinted windows mirroring the diner's lonely glow like impassive eyes. Inside, William Prescott sat utterly still, his own eyes, a sharp, penetrating grey, fixed on the scene, unfolding in the brightly lit booth. He hadn't moved for 10 minutes, the residual tension from a brutal conference call with Tokyo still thrumming beneath his tailored suit. He was a man accustomed to control, to precision, to a world that bent to his will, built on calculated risks and ruthless efficiency. Sentimentality was a luxury Prescott Dynamics couldn't afford, and neither, usually, could he. He'd told Michael to wait by the diner just for a few minutes. The call had run long, impossibly long. He hadn't expected. This woman, this waitress in a cheap uniform feeding his son, showing him a kindness William rarely encountered, a kindness offered without knowledge of the Prescott name or the billions attached to it. A muscle tightened in his jaw. It was unexpected, illogical, and yet he couldn't look away. He watched the boy, his son, relax under the woman's gentle attention, watched the simple exchange of food and warmth. It sparked something unfamiliar within him. Not warmth, perhaps, but a grudging flicker of interest, mixed inexplicably with a sliver of something that felt unnervingly like debt. Michael was halfway through his second piece of grilled cheese, the weariness starting to lift from his small shoulders when the diner door chimed again. This time the woman who entered didn't belong. It wasn't just the expensive-looking practical rain gear she wore, shedding water onto the worn linoleum, or the way her blonde hair was efficiently tucked under a plain cap. It was the air around her. Sharp, composed, assessing everything in a single sweeping glance, she moved with a quiet purpose that felt out of place amidst the lingering scent of fried food and burnt coffee. Her gaze found Michael immediately softening, almost imperceptibly, Michael ready to go champ. Her voice was smooth, pleasant, but held an underlying note of management. Like someone used to handling situations efficiently. Michael looked up, a small frown creasing his brow. "But my dad, he's waiting in the car," the woman said, crouching beside the booth. Her smile was practiced, professional. "I'm Alice Bennett. I work with your father." Olivia stepped forward, instinctively, wiping her hands on her apron. She didn't like the way the boy's hopeful expression faltered slightly. "He all right?" she asked, directing the question to Alice, but keeping her eyes on Michael. He was pretty soaked when he came in. Alice Bennett met Olivia's gaze directly. There was no hostility, just a cool, professional assessment. "He's fine. Thank you for looking after him." Her tone was polite, but it carried an air of dismissal, a subtle boundary being drawn between their worlds. "We appreciate your kindness. Just glad he's okay," Olivia replied, holding Alice's gaze for a beat longer than necessary. She wouldn't be easily dismissed when a child's well-being was involved. Alice gave a tight professional nod, then turned her attention back to Michael, helping him gather the napkin and the last crust of his sandwich. Olivia watched them go. Alice expertly maneuvering the wheelchair out into the relentless rain, a pang of unease settling in her stomach. There was something controlled about the whole exchange that didn't sit right. In the back of the Bentley, the scent of expensive leather and rain-damp wool filled the air. Michael, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket Alice had produced, was already starting to doze, lulled by the car's warmth and the rhythmic sweep of the wipers. William Prescott hadn't spoken since Alice and Michael had gotten in. His grey eyes stared unseeingly at the rain-streaked cityscape gliding past. "The boy is comfortable," Sir Alice reported quietly from the front passenger seat, breaking the silence. William didn't turn. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and clipped. "The woman, Miller. Olivia Miller." "Yes, sir. I want everything on her," he commanded. "Background, employment, history, financials, associations. Everything. I want to know who she is." Alice hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "It wasn't a typical request, sir. May I ask?" "You may not." William cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Just do it discreetly. I want the file on my desk by noon tomorrow." He wasn't just curious. He felt a strange compulsion to understand the anomaly she represented. Kindness like that, offered freely without calculation. It didn't fit the world he operated in. It was a loose variable, and William Prescott didn't tolerate loose variables. He needed to quantify her, categorize her, understand her angle, because everyone in his experience had an angle. The following evening, Olivia trudged up the narrow, dimly lit stairs to her third-floor walk-up apartment. The building smelled faintly of damp plaster and cooking odors from other units. She fumbled with her keys, exhaustion weighing her down like a physical burden. The encounter with Michael and the strange, sterile efficiency of Alice Bennett lingered in her mind, an unsettling counterpoint to the usual grind of her life. Just as she finally pushed the door open, a sharp knock sounded behind her. Not on her door, but on the flimsy outer door of the landing. She froze. No one ever knocked like that. Not here. Not at this hour. Her neighbors yelled through the walls or didn't bother interacting at all. Peering through the warped peephole, her stomach did a slow, cold flip. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a dark tailored coat that looked like it cost more than 3 months of her rent. His face was sharp, angular, his grey eyes assessing the shabby hallway with an unreadable expression. He looked utterly dangerously out of place. She didn't open the door. "Who is it?" Her voice was tight, wary. A pause. Then a voice deep and controlled resonated through the thin wood. "William Prescott." The name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" she asked, her hand tightening on the deadbolt she hadn't yet thrown. Another slight pause, as if he were choosing his words with surgical precision. To talk, every instinct screamed danger. This was trouble she didn't need. But a flicker of defiance mingled with intense curiosity, sparked by the sheer incongruity of his presence, won out, slowly, cautiously. She unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack enough to see him clearly, but keeping her foot braced against it. Up close, the power radiating from him was almost palpable. He carried the quiet confidence of a man who never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. "I don't know." "You," she stated flatly, her chin held high. His expression remained impassive, a mask of cool neutrality. "No," he conceded. "But you know my son." Olivia's breath hitched Michael. She studied William Prescott now with new intensity. The sharp grey eyes, so similar to the boy's blue ones, the expensive coat still faintly damp from the previous night's rain, the air of absolute authority. This was the father. The man Michael had been waiting for in the storm. This was money. Real money. The kind that shaped cities and crushed lives without ever needing to lift a hand. Her grip tightened on the doorframe. "Michael," she repeated the name, barely a whisper. "You're his father." A nod barely perceptible. "I was across the street last night. I saw what you did." The chill returned sharper this time. He'd been watching. "So you're here to complain because I gave your kid a sandwich." The sarcasm dripped from her voice, a defense mechanism against the sudden wave of intimidation. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face before vanishing. He said, his voice even, "I don't believe in charity, Ms. Miller, but I do believe in paying my debts." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. Before she could react, he stepped forward slightly, placing it firmly on the small, wobbly table just inside her doorway. Olivia stared at the envelope, as if it were a snake. Expensive paper, heavy official. "What is that?" She breathed suspicion, warring with a dawning, terrifying possibility. William Prescott met her gaze, his grey eyes pinning her in place. "It's a job offer." Her mind stalled. A job. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have indicated impatience on a lesser man. "Prescott Dynamics Executive Liaison. 6 figures. Full benefits. Starts immediately." A short, sharp laugh escaped Olivia, bordering on hysterical. You think you can just waltz in here, drop an envelope and buy me off because I gave your son some soup? You think I want to work for some rich man who thinks throwing money around makes everything even?" He didn't flinch. "I don't think you want charity, Ms. Miller," he stated, his voice low and steady. Hearing her name on his lips felt strangely violating. "That's why I'm not offering it. I'm offering you a position you might be uniquely qualified for." She folded her arms, trying to regain control. "You don't know the first thing about me." "I know enough." He countered his certainty. "Absolute. I know you showed my son kindness when you had nothing to gain. I know you treated him like a person, not an inconvenience or a stepping stone." In my world, his voice dropped slightly, taking on a harder edge that makes you exceptionally rare and potentially valuable. Olivia swallowed hard, thrown off balance by the unexpected sincerity, or what sounded like it, beneath the blunt offer. Her gaze flickered back to the envelope, its weight seeming to press down on the air in her small apartment. A job. A real job. An escape. The thought was both terrifying and intoxicatingly tempting, but her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. Never owe these people anything, baby. They don't give without taking. Why me? She finally whispered the question, hanging heavy between them. William Prescott held her gaze, and for a fleeting instant, the mask slipped. Something complex, something almost vulnerable, flickered in those grey depths. Because, he said, his voice softer now, like the admission, cost him something you saw, my son. Not my money. Not my name. You saw him. The words struck a chord deep inside her, unexpected and resonant. Her throat tightened. She looked at the envelope, then back at the imposing man filling her doorway. Slowly her hand reached out, fingers trembling slightly as they closed around the thick paper. I'll think about it, she murmured, unable to meet his eyes. He studied her for a long moment, his expression, once again, unreadable. Then he gave a curt nod. Do that. And without another word, he turned and walked away. His footsteps echoing briefly on the worn stairs, before fading into silence. Olivia stood frozen, the heavy envelope clutched in her hand, long after he was gone. The weight of it felt immense, far heavier than mere paper, because deep down, beneath the pride and the suspicion and the fear, she already knew she wasn't just going to think about it. The Prescott Dynamics Tower wasn't just a building. It was a statement. A gleaming monolith of smoked glass and steel that pierced the downtown skyline, reflecting the clouds and the lesser buildings around it with arrogant indifference. Stepping into the lobby felt like entering a different atmosphere altogether. Cool, hushed smelling faintly of expensive cleaning products and recycled climate-controlled air. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting, reflecting the sharp suits and clicking heels of people who moved with an unnerving blend of speed and precision. Everything whispered power and money. Olivia clutched her worn handbag, suddenly acutely aware of the blazer she'd bought on sale and the thrift store heels that had seemed perfectly acceptable just an hour ago. Here they felt like a costume. Every head that turned her way, and several did, seemed to perform an instant calculation, an assessment that left her feeling exposed, categorized, and found wanting. It wasn't hostility. Not exactly. It was a cool, detached evaluation, the kind reserved for something unexpected and potentially insignificant. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked towards the imposing reception desk, ignoring the knot tightening in her stomach. She'd faced judgment before. This was just a shinier version. After a brief, efficient exchange with the receptionist, she was directed to the executive floor. The elevator ascended with unnerving speed and silence, opening onto a corridor even quieter. More rarefied than the lobby, polished wood abstract art, plush carpeting that muffled her footsteps. It was a world away from the rattling radiator and linoleum floors of the Lexington diner. William Prescott's office was less an office and more a command center, overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a staggering panoramic view, the kind that made the bustling streets below look like insignificant tributaries. The desk was vast, sleek, and unnervingly empty, more sculpture than workspace. He didn't look up when the door opened, and Alice Bennett discreetly ushered Olivia inside. He was focused on a screen, one hand gesturing curtly towards a chair positioned opposite him. Olivia sat the expensive leather, sighing softly beneath her, the silence stretched thick with unspoken expectations. Finally he looked up, his grey eyes sharp, missing nothing. "You're late." Olivia glanced at the minimalist clock on the wall. "By 2 minutes. 2 minutes I don't get back, Ms. Miller." He stated his voice, devoid of inflection. "Time is the only commodity we can't manufacture more of at Prescott Dynamics. Remember that." She took a slow breath, forcing down the retort that sprang to her lips. "Okay," she thought. "So that's how it's going to be." Noted Mr. Prescott. Before he could reply, the door opened again, and Alice Bennet entered, holding a sleek tablet. "Good morning, sir, Miss Miller. I have the preliminary onboarding materials ready." Alice's professional smile remained firmly in place, but Olivia didn't miss the fleeting glance she cast her way, still assessing, still maintaining that careful distance. "Leave them," Prescott instructed, turning his attention back to his screen. "I'll handle Miss Miller's orientation." Alice nodded. "Very good, sir." She placed the tablet on the corner of the vast desk. As she turned to leave, she paused almost imperceptibly, her eyes meeting Olivia's for a brief moment. "Welcome to Prescott Dynamics, Olivia," she said, her voice slightly lower, softer than before. "It can be demanding. Don't hesitate to reach out if you require clarification on standard procedures." It wasn't exactly warm, but it felt like the closest thing to an olive branch Olivia had received since stepping into the building. Then she was gone. Prescott immediately launched into a rapid-fire overview of the company structure, current projects, and key personnel, his voice crisp, expecting her to keep up. There was no small talk, no easing in. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a very cold, very fast-moving river. He assigned her an initial task, reviewing internal reports on a subsidiary company facing performance issues, expecting a summary analysis by end of day. It was complex, dense material clearly designed as a test. Later navigating the hushed corridors towards the office space she'd been assigned, smaller than Prescott's naturally but still intimidatingly sleek, she almost collided with a man emerging from an adjacent office. He was immaculately dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, with perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that seemed permanently affixed. "Whoa there," he exclaimed, steadying her with a light touch on her arm that lingered a fraction too long. "Didn't see you. You must be the new arrival, Olivia Miller, right?" The names buzzing around the floor, he extended a hand, his smile widening. "Mark Jennings, Senior VP Acquisitions. Welcome aboard." "Thank you," Olivia replied, shaking his hand briefly. His grip was firm, confident. Too confident. Quite the entrance. Jennings continued leaning casually against the doorframe, his eyes doing a quick, barely concealed scan of her attire, straight to the executive liaison role, reporting directly to the big man himself. Skip all the usual steps. Impressive. "You must have made quite an impression on Prescott." His tone was light conversational, but Olivia detected an underlying edge, a current of insinuation beneath the polished surface. "Mr. Prescott made me an offer I felt was worth considering," Olivia said evenly, refusing to be drawn. Jennings chuckled a smooth sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Oh, I bet he did. William Prescott doesn't make offers lightly, or without expecting a significant return on investment." He winked. "Well, exciting times. It's always interesting to see fresh perspectives joining the team. Adds a certain unpredictability." He pushed off the doorframe. "If you need anything at all, finding the good coffee machine, navigating the political minefield, you name it, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to help out the new talent." He gave another broad smile and sauntered down the hall, leaving Olivia with a distinct sense of unease. His friendliness felt manufactured, his words coated in a thin veneer of collegiality that barely concealed something calculating and potentially hostile beneath political minefield he'd said. It felt like an apt description. The rest of the day was a blur of trying to decipher dense reports, navigating unfamiliar software, and enduring the continued subtle scrutiny of her new colleagues. She felt the weight of expectation, the pressure to prove she belonged in this alien environment, a place so far removed from the comforting chaos of the diner. She ate lunch alone at her desk, the silence of her office a stark contrast to the constant clatter and conversation she was used to. As the city lights began to glitter outside her window, late that afternoon, Olivia leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. She'd finished the summary analysis for Prescott, double-checking every figure, every conclusion. It was her first step, her first small declaration that she wouldn't be easily dismissed or intimidated. This world was cold, competitive, and filled with people like Mark Jennings, who likely saw her as an interloper. But she was here. She had accepted the unbelievable offer, stepped through the looking glass, and she wouldn't back down now. The challenge was immense, terrifying even, but a stubborn spark ignited within her. She would learn the rules. She would navigate the minefield. She would prove William Prescott hadn't made a mistake. More importantly, she would prove it to herself. A week into her new role, just as Olivia was beginning to grasp the intricate internal dynamics of Prescott Dynamics, the alliances, the rivalries, simmering beneath the polished surface, William Prescott summoned her to his office. The abruptness was typical, the gravity in his tone. Less so Orion Group, he began without preamble, gesturing for her to sit, as he remained, standing gazing out at the city skyline. Reginald Ashworth. We have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Proposed joint venture involving our Midwest manufacturing division. Olivia nodded, recalling the preliminary files she'd reviewed. The one involving significant restructuring. Prescott turned his grey eyes sharp. Restructuring is Ashworth's preferred euphemism. What he means is shutting down 2 plants and outsourcing production overseas to cut labor costs, thousands of jobs. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Orion holds significant leverage in this deal. Ashworth is arrogant old money and believes sentiment has no place in business. He finally met her gaze directly. You'll be attending the meeting with me. Olivia felt a jolt, a mixture of apprehension and a strange surge of adrenaline. This wasn't reviewing internal reports. This was high-stakes negotiation with potentially devastating human consequences. What role do you expect me to play, Mr. Prescott? I expect you, he said, his voice level to listen, to observe. And to offer your assessment, Ashworth won't expect input from you. He likely won't even see you. Use that. It wasn't an order to speak, nor was it a prohibition. It was a test wrapped in strategy. That night, Olivia didn't just review the financial projections and market analyses provided by Alice. She dug deeper. She pulled up reports on the specific plants, targeted for closure read articles about the towns they supported, looked at employee tenure data, trying to grasp the human reality behind the abstract figures. She remembered the feeling of uncertainty when the textile plant her own mother worked had faced similar rumors years ago, the fear that rippled through her community. She worked late into the night, fueled by lukewarm coffee from the machine down the hall, searching for leverage for an angle Ashworth and his team might have overlooked, an argument that went beyond the cold, hard numbers. She found herself sketching furiously on a notepad, not the artistic dreams she usually kept hidden, but flowcharts, connection points, potential consequences, spreading like ripples. She wasn't just looking for a way to save jobs. She was looking for a way to make saving those jobs the smarter business decision. The conference room the next morning was an exercise in calculated intimidation. All chrome glass and dark polished wood, it felt designed to make people feel small. Reginald Ashworth and his two associates sat opposite Olivia and William Prescott, radiating an aura of unshakable confidence born from generations of privilege and power. Ashworth, a man in his 60s with slicked-back silver hair and eyes the color of faded steel, barely acknowledged Olivia's presence beyond a cursory dismissive nod when Prescott made the introductions. The initial discussion was a predictable dance of corporate jargon and veiled threats. Ashworth presented the outsourcing plan as an inevitable step towards efficiency and increased shareholder value, dismissing Prescott's concerns about workforce impact as regrettable but necessary adjustments. "It's not personal," William Ashworth drawled, steepling his fingers. "It's simply good business. Maximizing returns. You understand?" Olivia felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. Not personal. How many times had she heard that phrase, used to justify actions that ripped apart lives and communities? She saw the faces behind the numbers, the line workers, the supervisors, the families relying on those paychecks. She thought of Michael, waiting alone in the rain, a small boy dependent on the decisions of powerful men like these. Prescott countered Ashworth's points with cool logic, citing long-term infrastructure stability and the value of a skilled, loyal workforce, but Ashworth remained unmoved, his smile thin and condescending. He directed all his comments to Prescott, pointedly ignoring Olivia. It was when Ashworth made a dismissive gesture, saying, "Perhaps your assistant could fetch us some fresh coffee while we discuss the serious figures," that Olivia knew she couldn't remain silent. She leaned forward slightly, drawing Ashworth's irritated gaze. "Actually, Mr. Ashworth," she began, her voice, calm but clear, cutting through the tense silence, "I was just looking at your serious figures, specifically the projected cost savings versus the long-term liabilities." Ashworth's eyebrows rose fractionally. Prescott remained impassive, watching her, giving nothing away. "You anticipate a 15% reduction in labor costs in the first 2 years. Olivia continued meeting Ashworth's stare without flinching. "But your projections seem to conveniently omit the escalating instability in the proposed overseas region, documented supply chain disruptions, averaging an 8% loss over the past 5 years for similar ventures, and the inevitable PR fallout." She slid a concise, single-page summary she had prepared across the polished table. Headlines like "Prescott Dynamics betrays American workers for foreign profit" tend to negatively impact stock prices far more significantly than short-term labor savings can offset. Especially, she added, tapping a specific point on the summary, when those savings evaporate within 3 to 4 years due to rising costs in the new location, requiring another costly restructuring. Ashworth glanced down at the paper with visible disdain, but didn't touch it. "And you are?" he asked, his tone laced with icy condescension. "Olivia Miller," she replied steadily, "executive liaison to Mr. Prescott, and someone who understands that good business involves looking beyond the next quarter's earnings report." "Look, sweetheart." Ashworth began, leaning back with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this is the big league. Decisions are made on numbers, not bleeding heart appeals." Olivia didn't rise to the bait. Instead, her voice became even calmer, more precise. "These are numbers, Mr. Ashworth. The cost of severance packages versus retraining. The cost of negative brand perception. the quantifiable risk of supply chain failure based on geopolitical analysis, the documented long-term failure rate of ventures prioritizing immediate cuts over sustainable infrastructure. She paused. Or perhaps you consider the potential loss of consumer trust and market share just sentiment. Silence descended on the room. Ashworth stared at her, his condescending smile finally faltering, replaced by a flicker of surprise and grudging recalculation. His associates shifted uncomfortably. He finally picked up the paper she had provided, his eyes scanning it quickly. Olivia glanced at William Prescott. His expression was still unreadable, but she saw it. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his posture, a new intensity in his gaze as he watched Ashworth. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was seeing her. Finally, Ashworth tossed the paper back onto the table. Your analysis is aggressive. He conceded, his tone clipped. Perhaps overly pessimistic. Perhaps Olivia allowed smoothly. Or perhaps it's realistic. The kind of realism your investors might appreciate before committing to a strategy with significant, documented, long-term risks. Ashworth's jaw tightened. He looked at Prescott. We'll revisit the proposal internally. Prescott gave a curt nod, the barest hint of satisfaction in his eyes. See that you do. The meeting concluded shortly after the Orion team departing with considerably less bluster than they had arrived with. As the door clicked shut behind them, Olivia finally allowed herself to exhale, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving a tremor of exhaustion in its wake. She turned to face Prescott, bracing herself for his critique. He studied her for a long moment, his grey eyes searching her face. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying undeniable weight. I told you Ashworth wouldn't see you coming. A pause. He sees you now. He walked towards the door, then stopped, turning back slightly. Good work, Miller. It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from William Prescott, it felt like a thunderous ovation. Olivia watched him leave, a slow smile finally touching her lips. She had faced the giant, stood her ground, and made a difference. And for the first time since walking into the imposing tower of Prescott Dynamics, she felt a flicker, however small, of belonging. She had earned her place at the table. In the weeks following the Orion group negotiation, a subtle shift occurred. Olivia felt it in the way fewer heads turned when she walked down the corridor, in the grudging respect occasionally visible in the eyes of Prescott's senior staff. Even William Prescott himself seemed fractionally less guarded. He still drove her hard, challenged her constantly, but there was a new quality to their interactions, a sense that he was genuinely listening to her insights, not just testing her resilience. She was finding her footing, beginning to believe she could actually navigate this complex world. And Mark Jennings was always there, always ready with a seemingly helpful piece of advice, a shared frustration about corporate bureaucracy, a casual offer to collaborate on overlapping projects. He'd helpfully CC'd her on sensitive email chains. She wasn't initially part of explaining it, as keeping her in the loop. He'd offered access to shared drives containing competitor analysis data he'd compiled, saying it might give her useful context for her liaison role. It all felt helpful. Perhaps a little too helpful, a voice whispered in the back of Olivia's mind, but she pushed it down. Maybe she had misjudged him. Maybe he was just trying to be a colleague. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. It began not with a bang, but with a chillingly quiet summons to William Prescott's office. Alice Bennett met her at the door. Her usual professional composure strained her face pale. There's a situation, Olivia. she said, her voice low. "Mr. Prescott is waiting." The atmosphere inside Prescott's office was glacial. He wasn't looking out the window this time. He was seated behind his desk, hands clasped tightly on the polished surface, his grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Spread out before him were printed copies of emails and data logs. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice dangerously soft. "Can you explain this?" He slid one of the printed emails across the desk. Olivia picked it up, her heart beginning a slow, heavy drum against her ribs. It was an email addressed to a journalist known for breaking corporate scandals. Attached was a file containing highly confidential, unreleased quarterly financial projections for Prescott Dynamics, the kind of information that could send stock prices plummeting if leaked prematurely. And the sender clearly displayed in the header, Olivia Miller. The blood drained from her face. This isn't... The words caught in her throat. She looked at the date and time stamp, sent late the previous evening from her work account. "I didn't send this." "Mr. Prescott, I swear. The logs show it. Originated from your workstation, routed through an external anonymizing server. But the initial digital fingerprint is yours." Prescott stated his voice, flat, betraying no emotion. "Furthermore, the attached file contains data compiled from several restricted servers. Servers," he paused, his gaze unwavering, "that logs show you accessed yesterday afternoon." Olivia's mind raced, scrambling to make sense of it. She had accessed some restricted servers yesterday, looking for competitor data. Mark Jennings had pointed her towards for a market analysis report. He had even helped her troubleshoot access permissions. Mark. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The helpfulness, the shared access, the email chains, it wasn't collegiality. It was scaffolding for this exact moment. "I accessed some servers yesterday," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, despite her efforts to control it. "Mark Jennings was assisting me with finding some background data for the quarterly report analysis." Prescott's expression didn't change. "Mr. Jennings denies any involvement or knowledge of your accessing files unrelated to that specific analysis. He claims he merely assisted with a standard software query. Of course he did. It was her word against a senior VP's, the outsider versus the established player." She felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "The board has been notified." Prescott continued, his voice relentless. "The potential damage is catastrophic. Millions in market value, regulatory investigations, irreparable harm to our reputation." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Miss Miller, why should I believe this isn't exactly what it looks like?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Why should he believe her? She was the improbable hire the waitress plucked from obscurity, given access and opportunity far exceeding her experience. From the outside, she was the perfect disgruntled employee, or perhaps someone easily manipulated by competitors. "The narrative wrote itself because it's not true," she whispered, gripping the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Because I wouldn't do this. Why would I? People do inexplicable things when offered enough money," Prescott countered, his tone hardening slightly, "or when seeking revenge for perceived slights." Olivia recoiled as if struck revenge. Money, did he really think so little of her? Tears pricked her eyes, hot with anger and a crushing sense of despair. She had worked so hard, tried so desperately to prove herself, and for what? To be accused of betrayal, based on fabricated evidence. That night's sleep was impossible. Olivia paced the confines of her small apartment, the city lights outside, mocking her with their indifferent glitter. The four walls felt like they were closing in. Every shadow seemed to hold an accusation. She replayed every interaction with Mark Jennings, every seemingly innocent comment, every shared file, seeing them now through the horrifying lens of his betrayal. How could she have been so blind? So trusting was her kindness. The fatal flaw was her desire to belong, to prove herself, the vulnerability he had exploited. Doubt, cold and insidious, crept into her thoughts. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this world. Maybe she was just a waitress who got lucky, playing in a league far above her head, destined to be crushed by its ruthless machinery. The thought of facing the board, the sneering dismissal of men like Ashworth, now amplified by suspicion and accusation. It was terrifying. Part of her wanted to run, to disappear back into the anonymity of her old life, to slam the door on Prescott Dynamics and never look back. Let them think what they wanted. What was the point of fighting a battle she couldn't possibly win? Meanwhile, across town, in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Olivia could only see from a distance. William Prescott stared into a glass of amber liquid, the ice long melted. He replayed the meeting with Olivia, her shock, her denial, the raw fear in her eyes. He compared it to the cool, practiced denial Mark Jennings had offered earlier, laced with just the right amount of concern for the company and subtle insinuations about Olivia's inexperience. The evidence against her was compelling, meticulously crafted. The board was demanding her immediate termination, a scapegoat to appease the market and contain the damage. It was the logical move, the business move. Cut the liability, cauterize the wound, move on. Protecting the company was his primary duty. But he remembered Olivia crouching in the rain beside Michael's wheelchair, her genuine warmth cutting through the storm. He remembered her fierce intelligence and unexpected courage facing down Reginald Ashworth, arguing not just for profit, but for people. He remembered her quiet determination, her refusal to be intimidated by the wealth and power surrounding her. He thought of the flicker of vulnerability he'd seen when he offered her the job, the pride warring with hope in her eyes. Was that woman capable of this kind of calculated betrayal? His gut and instinct, honed by years of navigating treacherous corporate waters, but lately complicated by unfamiliar feelings, screamed. No, the Olivia Miller. He was beginning to know, the one who saw his son. Not his name wouldn't do this. But the evidence, the risk. He swirled the liquid in his glass. Trusting her was illogical. Defending her would put him in direct opposition to his board, risking his own position, potentially exacerbating the corporate crisis. It was a gamble, a massive one, based on nothing more than an intuition, a feeling that this woman, this anomaly, was fundamentally decent. It went against every principle of calculated risk management he lived by. He thought of the alternative, throwing her to the wolves, sacrificing her to protect the structure he had built. It was the safe play, the Prescott play, but the thought left a sour taste in his mouth, a feeling disturbingly close to self-disgust. Was this the legacy he wanted? A company built on expediency, where loyalty was discarded and decency was a liability? He made a decision. It wasn't logical. It wasn't safe. But it felt right. The next morning, Olivia returned to Prescott Dynamics, feeling like she was walking towards her own execution. She expected to be met by security, her access denied. Instead, Alice Bennett intercepted her near the elevators, her expression unreadable, but lacking the previous day's strain. "Mr. Prescott wants to see you." Olivia entered his office, bracing herself for the inevitable. He was standing by the window again. He turned to face her, his expression stern, but the icy accusation from yesterday was gone, replaced by something else. "Resolution, the board is demanding your immediate dismissal," he stated, his voice calm. Olivia nodded numbly. "I understand they believe you are guilty." He paused. "The evidence is significant." She closed her eyes briefly. "I know." But he continued, and her eyes snapped open. "I don't." Olivia stared at him, unable to process the words. You believe me, I believe." Prescott said, slowly, deliberately, "that the woman who showed my son kindness in the rain, the woman who fought Reginald Ashworth for people she'd never met, is not capable of this. Either I was wrong about you then, or I am wrong about this evidence. Now I'm choosing to bet I wasn't wrong about you." He took a breath. "This won't be easy. The board will fight us. We have very little time. But if you're innocent, we need to prove it together." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of disbelief, of overwhelming relief, and of a fierce, renewed determination. Someone saw her. Someone believed her. In the heart of the storm, William Prescott had just thrown her a lifeline, and she would hold on to it with everything she had. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The days that followed, William Prescott's declaration of trust were a blur of tense, focused activity. An uneasy truce settled over the executive floor. The board, while placated temporarily by Prescott's assurances that the situation was being handled, internally remained a looming threat demanding results. Olivia and Prescott, with Alice Bennett running point on the technical deep dive, transformed Prescott's spacious office into a war room. They worked with a quiet intensity, fueled by coffee adrenaline and the ticking clock Alice, her initial reserve replaced by fierce loyalty to Prescott, and a growing respect for Olivia, proved relentless in navigating the labyrinthine digital pathways of Prescott Dynamics. She meticulously traced IP addresses, cross-referenced server access logs, reviewed security camera footage, timestamps, searching for the inconsistencies, the anomalies that would expose the lie. Olivia, drawing on an analytical ability she hadn't fully realized she possessed, pored over financial reports, personnel files, and project timelines, looking for motive for connections. Why frame her? What did Mark Jennings gain? Was he working alone? She learned to read between the lines of corporate reports, to sense the hidden currents beneath the surface of polished presentations. William Prescott orchestrated the effort, his sharp mind directing their focus, leveraging his authority to grant access where needed, deflecting inquiries from anxious board members. He observed Olivia saw her quick grasp of complex data, her insightful questions, her refusal to be intimidated by the scale of the task. He saw the toll the stress was taking, the shadows under her eyes, the way she jumped slightly whenever her phone buzzed, but also the steel in her spine that refused to bend. A silent partnership formed between them, forged in the crucible of crisis, built on a shared objective and the fragile, unlikely trust he had extended. Their first leads hit frustrating dead ends. The external server used to send the damaging email was a ghost, wiped clean after use. The initial access logs from Olivia's workstation seemed damningly clear. Mark Jennings had covered his tracks well, layering deception upon deception. Doubt flickered occasionally. What if they were wrong? What if the evidence really was unassailable? The breakthrough came unexpectedly late one evening from Alice. I found something, she announced, her voice tight with controlled excitement, as Olivia and Prescott gathered around her monitor. It's not in the server logs for the leaked financials. It's in the remote access, VPN logs for the week before the leak. She pulled up a series of time-stamped entries. Standard procedure requires dual authentication for remote access to the secure financial forecast servers. Jennings logged in multiple times that week. Standard procedure. But look. She highlighted a specific entry, 3 a.m. Tuesday, a remote login to the specific server partition where the leaked data was stored, but this login bypassed the standard dual authentication protocol using an older, supposedly decommissioned, administrative override code. An override code only a handful of senior executives would even know existed. Prescott murmured, his eyes narrowing. Exactly, Alice confirmed. And security logs show Mark Jennings' badge swiped into the building 30 minutes prior to that remote login accessing the network infrastructure closet on the server floor. He was physically in the building, using an old back door while pretending to be remote, likely planting the data fragment or the malware that would later implicate Olivia's workstation. It was the crack in the facade, the piece that didn't fit Jennings' narrative of routine work. It wasn't definitive proof of the email leak itself, but it placed him at the scene, using clandestine methods to access the sensitive data shortly before it was compromised, combined with a subtle anomaly Olivia had found in Jennings' expense reports. A suspiciously large, vaguely categorized consultancy payment dated shortly after the leak. The picture was becoming clearer. Armed with this new evidence, Prescott moved swiftly. He convened an emergency meeting of the board of directors, requesting the presence of both Olivia Miller and Mark Jennings. The atmosphere in the main conference room was thick with tension. The board members, powerful men, accustomed to controlling outcomes, looked impatient and grim. Mark Jennings sat near the head of the table, radiating a forced confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. He shot Olivia a look that mingled feigned sympathy with a glint of triumphant malice. Olivia met his gaze steadily, her fear replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Prescott opened the meeting curtly, outlining the severity of the data leak and the initial evidence pointing towards Miss Miller. He then yielded the floor to Olivia. Taking a deep breath, Olivia stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She calmly, methodically presented the findings of their investigation. She laid out the timeline, the discovery of the VPN log anomaly, the administrative override code, the security footage placing Jennings in the infrastructure closet at 2:30 a.m., the suspicious consultancy payment in his expenses. She presented it not as an accusation, but as a series of documented facts that contradicted the initial assumptions. The evidence initially presented, Olivia concluded, her voice steady, was designed to point in one direction, but a deeper look reveals significant inconsistencies, all tracing back to Mr. Jennings's unusual and unauthorized access to the compromised data shortly before the leak occurred. A stunned silence fell over the room. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mark Jennings leaped to his feet. His face flushed, the polished mask finally cracking. "This is outrageous. A desperate fabrication. She's manipulating logs, twisting facts to save herself." Are we? Prescott's voice cut through Jennings's outburst like ice. He nodded to Alice, who remotely displayed the security footage timestamp on the main screen. Jennings clearly visible, entering the secure server area in the dead of night. Then she displayed the corresponding VPN log entry with the bypassed authentication. Jennings stared at the screen, his face paling rapidly. That could be anything. Routine maintenance. A system check. At 3 a.m., using a decommissioned override code you weren't authorized to possess. Prescott countered coolly. And what about the consultancy payment Mark received 3 days after the leak from a shell corporation, linked to one of Orion Group's known back-channel operators. That was the final blow. Jennings seemed to physically deflate his eyes, darting around the room, finding no support. Only stony-faced condemnation. The arrogance dissolved into naked panic. It wasn't... Ashworth approached me, he said. He implied a senior position at Orion if Prescott Dynamics faltered. He suggested Miller was an easy target, the outsider. His desperate confession tumbled out, fragmented and self-incriminating. William Prescott stood slowly, his presence dominating the room. Thank you for clarifying, Mark. His voice was devoid of emotion, but carried the weight of absolute finality. Security will escort you from the building. Your termination is effective immediately. Prescott Dynamics will pursue all available legal remedies for corporate espionage fraud and damages. Jennings gaped speechless as two stoic security guards entered the room on cue. He shot Olivia a look of pure hatred before being led away. The silence that followed was profound. The board members looked from the empty chair to Olivia, their expressions a mixture of shock, relief, and a dawning grudging respect. The chairman cleared his throat. Miss Miller, Mr. Prescott, it appears we owe you both an apology. And our gratitude for uncovering this threat. Olivia simply nodded, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving her feeling hollowed out, but undeniably vindicated. Later, after the board members had dispersed, offering awkward congratulations, she stood alone with Prescott in the now empty conference room. You did it, he said quietly, looking at her not as an employee, but as an equal. We did it, she corrected softly, exhaustion washing over her. The relief was immense, but the fight had taken its toll. She had faced down betrayal and accusation, stared into the abyss of losing everything, and somehow emerged stronger. Prescott gave a rare small smile. Yes, he agreed. We did. The crisis was over. Her name was cleared. Their unlikely partnership had not only survived but had been forged into something solid, something built on mutual respect earned under fire. The price of truth had been high, but they had paid it 5 years. Sometimes, Olivia Miller still found it hard to believe 5 years since she'd walked into Prescott Dynamics, terrified and defiant. Now the nameplate on her door read, Olivia Miller, Vice President, Corporate Strategy. The view from her window was the same panoramic sweep of the city, but now, instead of feeling like an outsider looking in, she felt responsible for it, in small ways at least. Her influence wasn't just in boardrooms analyzing market trends. It was in the newly implemented Fair Wage Initiative for contract workers, a policy she had fought for, presenting data that proved ethical treatment, boosted productivity, and reduced turnover, appealing to Prescott's logic while satisfying her own conscience. It was in the mentorship program she personally spearheaded, connecting promising young employees from disadvantaged backgrounds with senior executives. She'd just finished a session with Maya, a bright young woman from her old neighborhood, whose potential shone brightly now that she had opportunity's door cracked open. Seeing Maya's growing confidence was a reward far richer than any stock option. The relationship with William Prescott had evolved too thawing from icy suspicion into a bedrock of mutual respect and surprising camaraderie. The sharp edges remained, but now they worked in tandem, his strategic vision complemented by her grounded understanding of human impact. They didn't always agree, but their debates were productive, challenging, pushing the company towards a future that was both profitable and principled. The community center proposal looks solid, William remarked one afternoon, glancing up from a report Olivia had prepared on a potential partnership with a non-profit in a struggling district. Your projections on local skills development are compelling, Olivia smiled faintly. People thrive when given the tools and the chance. William, it's just good sense and good business long-term. He met her gaze, a hint of his rare smile touching his lips. You've taught me to expand my definition of long-term, Olivia. The bond extended beyond the office walls. Michael Prescott, now a confident, articulate freshman at university, studying architecture. His passion discovered partly through conversations with Olivia about form, function, and beauty, was a regular fixture at informal Sunday dinners. He still used his wheelchair, but he navigated the world with an assurance that hadn't seemed possible that rainy night years ago. Tonight, the three of them shared pizza in William's spacious but comfortable living area, the conversation easy, flowing from Michael's latest design project to Olivia's plans for the foundation launch. It wasn't a conventional family, but it was real, forged through shared trials and unexpected connections. "Are you nervous about your speech tomorrow?" Olivia asked Michael, noticing him fidget slightly. He grinned, a flash of the boy she'd first met. A little, but mostly excited. "It feels important." The launch of the Prescott Miller Foundation the next day was bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon sun, held not in a sterile corporate ballroom, but at the newly opened Community Youth Center. It was funding. The event felt vibrant, hopeful. Local families, city officials, Prescott dynamics, employees, and bright-eyed teenagers mingled, sharing food and optimism. Standing on the small stage, Olivia looked out at the diverse crowd. Her journey flashed through her mind. The diner, the rain, the fear, the fight, the unexpected alliances. She hadn't sought power, but now that she had it, she understood its true value lay not in personal gain, but in the ability to open doors for others, just as one had been unexpectedly opened for her. William spoke first, brief and characteristically unsentimental, but his words carried weight. He spoke of investing in potential of corporate responsibility, extending beyond shareholder reports. He concluded by saying, "This foundation exists because true value isn't always found on a balance sheet. Sometimes it's found in simple acts of kindness and in the remarkable people who remind us of that." He nodded towards Olivia. Then Michael, positioned beside Olivia, delivered his short speech. He spoke not of charity, but of opportunity. He spoke of what it meant to have someone see past limitations, to offer warmth on a cold night, to believe in potential. His voice didn't waver. His blue eyes, so like his father's, grey ones, shining with sincerity. Kindness. He finished looking directly at Olivia, is the architecture of hope. Later, as the event wound down, Olivia stood with William near the entrance, watching the last families leave, kids clutching free books provided by the foundation. "You built this," Olivia Williams said quietly, gesturing around them. "Not just the foundation, the change within the company. Within—" He hesitated. It was a rare admission, delivered with his usual lack of fanfare, but it resonated deeply. He understood now. Wealth was a tool, powerful, but inert, until wielded with purpose. And purpose, he'd learned, was often found outside the pursuit of profit alone. Olivia smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "We built it, William." She thought of the journey, the struggles, the unexpected turns. It hadn't been easy. There were scars. But looking at the hopeful faces, feeling the warmth of the setting sun, she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that it had all been worth it. The legacy wasn't just in the name on the foundation wall. It was in the connections forged, the potential unleashed, the enduring truth that seeing the person, not just their circumstance, could change everything. and that was a foundation worth building on. How often does a single simple act of kindness ripple outwards, setting in motion waves that reshape not just one life, but many Olivia Miller's journey, born from a moment of compassion in the pouring rain, reminds us that seeing the person behind the circumstance holds incredible power. It wasn't an easy path. It was fraught with challenges, betrayals, and moments of profound doubt. But isn't that often how true strength is forged? Not in the absence of storms, but in the courage to navigate them with integrity. This story truly resonated with us, exploring the struggles, the unexpected connections, and the quiet triumphs that make us human. It leaves us wondering about the potential that lies dormant, waiting for just one person to believe in it. What about you? What part of Olivia's or William's journey struck the deepest chord with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely love hearing your perspectives. If this story touched your heart or made you think, please give it a like. It helps us know what resonates with you. And if you believe this story might offer hope or insight to someone else, please share it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into meaningful stories that explore the depths of human experience. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.